Okay, perfect. Et numéro 5, s'il vous plaît.
See them here, right? Which one is this? Is forward?
Yeah, that's
Yeah. Just looking. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. Okay, it works. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. Hey, Matt.
That's good.
Okay, perfect. Ok, numéro 1, s'il vous plaît. I'm just going to acknowledge that it's a little bit past 9, but they're telling me to delay because the morning sessions have filled up very slowly. So I'm going to linger for a couple more moments before we get started.
This place is a maze.
Yeah.
You can hide.
That was a lovely night last night. Thank you. Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry I had to leave. I got afraid if I didn't get home. I was gonna.
You did a really smart thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I started watching the live stream to see how it
I see. No, I think we're good. The technical team has been really, really helpful. I think everything's teed up. The colleague came up and said you should wait because the morning sessions are very slow. People are late. Yeah, so I know a couple others. Yeah, exactly. I remember well. Yeah, she said she felt really bad about it. She's got meetings lined up all the time. She couldn't figure out how to do this. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Welcome everybody. Bonjour à tous. I'm sorry to start a little bit late. They tell me the morning sessions have been filling up slowly, so I wanted to wait and make sure we had a critical mass of attendees. I know there are others that are expecting to be here. Thank you for joining today. This particular program is designed to talk about investable opportunities within the global health sector. So I'm not speaking today, nor are our speakers that are part of the panel today, speaking generically about innovation, generically about global health, but rather specifically about commercially scalable global health companies. And we've got a number of those to represent to you today. I want to briefly tell you who I am. My name is James Baer. I'm the Managing Director of Baraka Impact Finance. I'm going to go really quickly through a few slides to describe what we do and why I'm in this role. This is my second year presenting at Building Bridges, and I'm honored to be, one of the health guys and one of the impact finance guys on their regular roster. So Baraka means blessing, and in Swahili and Hebrew and Arabic. And I always show this slide because the intent of myself and the team that I work with is to try to bring as many blessings in the form of strategic partnerships that allow scale and allow people to have better access to care. Broadly, this is who we are. We have three primary assets. We have a pipeline of investable health innovators, several of whom are here today, about 270 companies. We have a network of over 700 impact-oriented investors around the world. And that's a broad category, impact-oriented investors, and we could have discussion about all the different types within that. And then we have a tool, an intelligence dashboard that uses third-party data to help to provide market context for individual investment opportunities. We're always looking at the combination of social impact plus market-based returns. I'm honored this particular time with Building Bridges to have representatives from three different organizations that we're working very closely with. Johnson & Johnson Impact Ventures, who we assist with sourcing and due diligence and some of the innovations that they're investing in. The UN Development Program Sustainable Finance Hub, who we recently signed a joint venture with to have bilateral data exchange and to assist in the dissemination of impact standards. That's a brand new, recently announced partnership. And then with Population Services International, who I meant to grab your logo. I'm sorry, Claire, I didn't get it on here. Who we've been discussing really interesting projects that Claire Stokes will tell you about today in sexual and reproductive health. So today's program is really framed by partners that we've come to know quite well and that are having a major impact on the entire domain of impact investing for health. So briefly, again, 270 companies. The companies that we represent at Baraka are generally 2 to 10 years in the market. They already have operations, they have a revenue model, they may or may not be profitable, and they're generally raising actively between 1 and 20 million US. They are the definition of the missing middle in emerging markets. We vet all of these companies for their social impact metrics, their intent, as well as their commercial scalability. And it goes without saying these days, the vast majority, 99%, are technology driven with a vast array of technology approaches. We also engage investors, and we do that through a number of modalities. We produce regular regional health investment reports. The ones you see up here are Latin America, Africa, and India. We also run regular pitch sessions in which we have 4 of our companies do 7-minute pitches to investors. Those are all virtual. We did 5 so far in 2022. We took a summer pause, and we start again next week with a regular Thursday series once a month. And certainly, if you can give me your contact information, if you're not already part of our network, we'll make sure you're made aware of those programs. This is a little snapshot to give you a very high-level flavor of the intelligence dashboard, which I mentioned. We are working with a Swiss data analytics company, as well as with the Heidelberg Institute for Global Health, to once again bring in third-party data to help to market contextualize each and every investment opportunity. Why does it matter that you have mobile-based access to primary care in Kenya? Because mobile penetration in Kenya is at 95%, and because brick-and-mortar facilities are far too distant from the peri-urban centers. That type of external data that drives a rationale for the specific interventions that we represent. This is our team, very broadly. I'm honored to have our co-founder, Audrey Sellian, in the front row here, and the rest of my team, many of whom are joining us virtually from different parts of the world. We are very, very spread out, but we stay, like all of us, virtually in touch on a day-in, day-out basis. So that's all I'm going to tell you about Baraka for the moment. I look forward to having one-on-one conversations with anybody who would like to know more. And let me set the stage for the discussion today. These are problems, and I think most of you in the room, I don't even need to do this. I'm preaching to the converted. But the problem is the incredible funding gap that we have in trying to reach the SDG 3 goals. So 130 billion in current year money, but by 2030 it's projected to rise to 371 billion. We know that health spending in most countries, both emerging markets and developed markets, is stagnant. There's not enough increase there, and that traditional ODA has plateaued over the last few years and is not expected to greatly increase. So that's our core problem. We know that there's something in the neighborhood of 200 trillion in global capital markets circulating at any given time. 1% of that could address this problem. Baraka is by far not the only one to say we need to get that private capital to bear on meeting that funding gap. So a really, for me and the world that I live in, a very exciting report came out from the International Finance Corporation, British International Invest, Dahlberg, and several others, just second quarter of this year, that talks specifically about the opportunities for private capital in the health sector of emerging markets. And there's just a few big takeaways, and I thought this was a nice way to kind of frame the rest of the discussion and the presentations that you'll see today. So all of the macro trends that are out there, this means technology advancement, this means knowledge capital concentration that's now available in emerging markets. This means increased public attention to health issues, kind of support the viability of global health innovations that can commercially scale. Having an expanding consumer base is key to any commercially viable solution, and that exists in multiple emerging markets as the middle class continues to grow. And in fact, investments in healthcare in low and middle income countries have been growing at greater than 24% over the past 5 years. A couple other takeaways from that same I4H, that's their acronym for this report, and I really highly recommend you get it if you're in this field at all, because they've got a lot of really interesting data points and perspectives. But their point is that a great majority of care in low and middle income countries is already coming from private sector and being funded from private sources. So more than 50% of all healthcare in Africa is through the private sector, and more than 80% of all healthcare in South Asia is administered by private providers. Another interesting kind of recommendation, and I'm bringing these points up because they're relevant to today. And Matt Gordon, who's here in the room with me, had this discussion over dinner the other night about the way in which a small or medium-sized company in the health sector of emerging markets today must think about the lower middle class of consumer. To only target base of the pyramid, it's unlikely the economic scale is going to be there. So how are you segmenting your market target, and how are you aiming for where you're going to have the margin to make money while also serving the base of the pyramid? So it was refreshing from those of us who are in the field to see this report come out with a strong recommendation that investors should focus on population segment making between $5 and $30 per day. That's going to represent 50 to 70% of the population in many emerging markets. And they put this little table up. I'm not sure how clear it is to you, but basically that population of making between 5 and 30 represents anywhere from 50 to 70% of many emerging markets. Government, philanthropy, discounted capital is still going to be necessary to meet the base of the pyramid. And that's still true in developed markets as well. So thinking about that kind of segmentation of market is really important when you're thinking about where investments are going to succeed. And then finally, last slide from this particular report talks about a framework for sustainability that says, look at your addressable market, understand how it is growing, make sure that the margins and size will provide attractive returns, and that there's a clear path to maturity and exit. These are big challenges. But if those core commercial considerations have been thoroughly thought through and followed, and then you take the inclusiveness, which you're offering solutions which address identified gaps, you are complementing the public sector, and that whole public sector conversation is going to be a really interesting one. Many of the presenters today have started with the private sector. They've been focusing on their private market, but they've got an eye to how they're going to interface publicly. They're either doing it now or they're on their way to do it. And that kind of dual market perspective is essential to success, in our opinion. And then to deploy in a responsible manner, and that means many, many things, and we can talk about that over time, and you'll see examples of that today. So I'm going to stop talking really quickly, but I want you to think about these following themes when you're watching the presentations today, and then as we move into our panel discussion. So think through the lenses of access, affordability, quality, and equity. There are many KPI out there to measure social impact success, but I contest that if you've got these 4 windows as your primary lenses, you can then find KPI that are meaningful behind them. Access, affordability, quality, and equity. Integration, optimization of the public and private sector. So I already spoke to that, how critical it is that each and every intervention is thinking about both those sectors of the economy. And by the way, that also means in thinking about funding and customers. So not just the services, but in fact the resources that are represented by both the public and the private sector. And then diversified financial vehicles, all of the companies that I'll be presenting today, and safe to say all the companies that we currently work with, are using a combination of grants, debt, and equity in order to move themselves forward. It's not a single game. You need that diversity in order to have impact and in order to offer the flexibility that entrepreneurs need to succeed. And then somewhat novel, and some of you may decide that it's a little too out there and esoteric that you don't care, but there's some people in the room that care a lot about how you balance being an NGO and being a commercial entity. And Population Services International, Claire Stokes is with us today, specifically that, but several of the other companies that we're working with are thinking about this same problem. Are we a social mission company? Are we a commercial entity? How do we merge those from a legal, structural perspective, as well as from a mission and motivation perspective? And then finally, multi-market strategies. And sometimes when I'm talking to global health purists, I get a reaction about this, but the world has changed so quickly. There is so much more multinational perspective. There is so much more technology-enabled ability to scale across markets that we consider it to be essential that most companies who want to scale significantly and are looking for private sector dollars are thinking about multiple markets. They should have traction in market 1, their domestic indigenous market. They should have a proven model, but they need to be thinking 2, 3, 4 regional or global markets in order to get the kind of scale that's going to make them successful from a commercial perspective. And so it's become somewhat controversial, but it's what we at Baraka believe to be a truism in 2022. So with that, I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to turn over to our first presenter, and really happy to introduce a company that we've been working very closely with for over a year now, and who graced us with their presence at last year's Building Bridges and continues to do amazing work. So this is Arun Prabhu Stanley, CEO of Landscent.
Thank you. Thank you, James.
Numero 2.
Good morning, everybody.
Can we move to number 2, please? Présentation numéro 2. There you go.
Perfect. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Lancet is a product and services company with a vision to accelerate the fight against disease of poverty. And all this started way back in 2011 when I was on a business trip in Kenya. I found myself in a funeral of a 4-year-old child. And I was shattered to hear that the child died from a mosquito bite. I left Kenya that trip as a changed person, determined to do something about it. And fast forward 5 years later, I was back in Kenya, this time along with my business partner, discussing with the Ministry of Health Kenya's malaria strategy. So from that time, there has been no turning back, and Lancet has uniquely developed a 2-track strategy. So track 1 is to address the near-term challenges, and track 2 is to address the long-term systemic changes which we need to bring into the system, aligning with WHO and the other global donors' guidance. Let me show you an example as to how we have implemented this strategy in terms of malaria. As most of you in the room might know, we are losing the battle against malaria. Every single day, we have more than 1,500 lives that are being lost in such a technologically advanced world. That is one child dying every single minute. I'm sure that nobody can accept this fact as we face it today. So on our track 1, we have taken the existing preventive technologies and we have improved them by margins so that it disrupts the status quo. For example, on our treated bed nets, it works on a patented slow-release technology with how we bind the insecticide on the yarn by microencapsulation, and we also use dual active ingredients on the roof and the sidewalls so that the mosquitoes don't build resistance. And in terms of our indoor residual sprays, our product lasts for longer than 18 months in semi-field trials, and this is more than twice the existing products in the market. So indoor residual programs are often investment intensive, and providing the long-lasting effect makes it more affordable for countries and the ministries of health. And on track 2, we have an active ingredient discovery program where we are screening natural compounds. We have screened more than 200,000 compounds, and 21 of them are in advanced phase trials. And these are mainly from eucalyptus, magnolia, garlic, some very, very interesting compounds. And this work is being funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. All of this wouldn't be possible without a diverse and experienced team of scientists and entrepreneurs, along with our deep partnership with research centers like the London School of Hygiene and also Ifakara Health Institute in Tanzania and many more. And on funding, we've raised more than $10 million during the lifespan of the company and achieved significant milestones along the way. On the research and development part, we have completed the high-risk stages of an R&D product development company, and we are very close to market entry, so we expect to achieve WHO pre-qualification. So we have 4 products in our pipeline. 1 product gets to the market end of next year in 2023, and then 24, 2 products, and 25, the 4th product for now. And the market size, the serviceable addressable market is more than $2 billion for malaria prevention products, and the demand continues to rise year on year. We call our business a de-risk business because we are well past the high-risk stages of research and development. And our work and our customers are primarily the ministries of health and the global donors who have last-mile delivery in sub-Saharan Africa, which actually is a challenge when we look at other commercial businesses. Our current ask is for $20 million in terms of equity and loans, and $5.5 million of which is already raised. In closing, I would like to bring your attention to this decade-old paper which was published in the Stanford Social Innovative Review. It was published in 2012, talking about 3 different companies, types of companies, which are the market innovators, market scalers, and system changers. We see that most of the capital is going to the market scalers because the business model is scaling and investors find the business profitable and there is more investment going in there. Whereas the market innovators and the system changers are ignored. And 10 years later, we are almost in the same situation. But I'm saying that this needs to change because if we want to bring about a change in real problems such as addressing disease of poverty, there needs to be investments driven into all the 3 segments of the market. Now, interestingly, Lancet is very active in all these 3 segments. As an innovator, we have the active ingredient discovery project. And as market scalers, we have our indoor residual spraying and bed nets, which by 2027 we project to protect more than 250 million people. That is the impact that we are focusing and working on. And as market systems, as a systems changer, we are also thinking deep in terms of malaria, engaging with ministries of health, understanding what are the other problems. And one of the products that we are bringing into the portfolio is an ecological waterless biotoilet, because we see a lot of correlation between sanitation and malaria. And this product is being piloted in the western parts of China and in Ethiopia. So my invitation is to, as an investment community, to back companies such as us so that we will be able to scale and reach more markets and bring the impact that we're aiming for. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Arun. We'll turn it over now to Guillermo Pepe from Mamotest. I didn't tell you all how we're doing this today. These are 7-minute presentations. There'll be 4 of those before we move into our panel discussion. And so our panelists are in the wings here or on Zoom, and will be joining us shortly if they're not already here. Guillermo, it's you.
Thank you. So it's number 3,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, numero 3. Oui. Are you ready for number 3?
Yeah.
And they want you to keep your
Yeah,
mouth there
close.
and look at that screen rather.
Okay, perfect. Hi everyone, my name is Guillermo Pepe. I'm the founder and CEO of Mamotest. Mamotest is a high-quality diagnosis and patient support digital solution that is defeating breast cancer. This is not a promise, this is happening. The person in the image is my father. He's a medical doctor specializing on breast imaging diagnosis. 10 years ago, we had a conversation that completely changed our lives. He told me about the dramatic situation with breast cancer globally. He told me that 2,000 women die every year because of breast cancer. That is the equivalent of a city the size of Geneva disappearing every year, full of women. And 70% of those deaths are in developing economies. And this is mainly because of 2 reasons. Number 1 is lack of early diagnosis. And that's the obvious reason. But then there is a second reason that is maybe more of a hidden reason, and it's that the health system is broken. The health system in a developing country especially looks like this. It's completely fragmented, it works in silos, it doesn't share data, or information about its patients. So in a developing economy, even if a woman managed to get an early diagnosis, they wouldn't get to a treatment on time because of this system that is broken and there is no clear path to get to a treatment. Taking that into account, 17 months ago, we started developing and implementing this digital solution. This is a platform that gets connected to existing mammography units at hospitals and private clinics. And what we do is we design customized screening programs for that specific clinic. We run awareness campaigns and we start bringing women to the centers. So women would get screened. Once a woman has a mammogram done, the image uploads to the platform and it gets interpretation by medical doctors using teleradiology and a second interpretation by artificial intelligence. Once we identify women at risk of developing breast cancer, we start following them along the entire patient journey until they get to a treatment on time. And during that follow-up, during all that process, we happen to collect a monumental amount of data like never before in the history of Latin America. There is no health data available in Latin America. So what we are starting to do is, right now we have two revenue streams. One that is pretty clear, it's the diagnosis is business as usual. We have been doing that for the last 10 years when we started with my father. And the second revenue stream is data monetization. For the first one, our customers are health insurance, women paying out of pocket, government and private companies that sponsor women so they can be checked every year once they have 4 years old. For the second revenue stream, the data monetization revenue stream, customers are big pharma, big tech companies, AI companies that need data to improve their algorithms, health data aggregators such as IQVIA, Trinetics, Prognos, and of course insurance and even government would make use of that data in order to design better public policy and decide on budgets. This is how we improve the system. A woman that used to pay $100 for a mammogram in the private system now is paying $20 with Mammotest. So the economic barrier is breakdown. And a woman that used to need 9 months in order to get to a treatment when she was diagnosed with breast cancer, with Mammotest, would get to a treatment in only 2 months. So we improve the system in general while we are collecting data that will keep on improving the system because we would get better drugs, better medical devices production, and well, all of the other services surrounding this will be benefit from that data. We have impacted already 600,000 women in Argentina and Mexico. We are the first to have in Latin America this approach of 100% traceability of the patient since awareness, from awareness to diagnosis to treatment. And 87% of the women that get into our system and get diagnosed with breast cancer get to a treatment on time. Of course, we are looking to get to 100%. Last year, we closed our seed investment round, and it was led by Merck. We are the first direct investment from Merck in Latin America. The good thing about this platform is that it's tech agnostic. Today, we are focusing on breast cancer because it's what we know about. It's where we've been working on the last 10 years. and this is why we started focusing on breast cancer. But in the future, this platform and this system could be of use to address any other kind of cancer. We could be connecting our platform to any other kind of medical devices, not just a mammography unit. Today, we are operating in Argentina and Mexico, but on the roadmap, we would like to get to Brazil, Colombia, and the underserved US, especially Black population and Hispanic population. And of course, we want to get to the rest of the Americas. We are right now on a fundraising round, looking for $3 million, and this is to impact 300,000 women in Mexico in the next 12 months. This is how our combined business model of diagnosis and data will evolve through the years. And as you can see, the diagnosis business tends to flatten in the future, and this is because not just of evolving technology that may allow us to bring prices of a mammogram down, but also because we are going to progressively lower the prices of mammograms, so we would be lowering the price of entrance, the cost of entrance to the system for a woman in Latin America, because most of them are paying out of pocket. And by doing that, we will be increasing the volume of women getting there and increasing the volume of data available. So in a way, a woman would be paying with her anonymized data as a digital currency. We will be paying for not just the mammogram, but also the concierge services they are getting after once they are diagnosed. This year only, we have been selected by World Economic Forum as one of the 100 tech partners pioneers. United Nations, actually last year, selected us among the 4 UNDP, among the 4 health tech startups with great potential to positively impact the health system in developing economies. We've been finalists of MIT Solve contest, which chooses the best digital solution in healthcare. And Norsken Foundation has selected us among its nominee for the Impact 100 list, which select companies with potential to reach 1 billion people. We believe we are building the path from a sick care that is reactive and old to a real healthcare that keep women alive. Thank you very much.
Can you now tee up our remote presenters from South Africa, the number 4? So I'm just going to draw your attention, if you're probably all ahead of me, but think about 2 things with these 2 companies that you just saw present. The complexity and diversity of their business models. So what Landsend's doing in terms of a massive R&D effort, and then their malaria focus with the current book of business and the ability to go beyond that. And then in the case of MammoTest, they're not just looking at mammography, but they're looking at the data that is coming out of those services in order to further expand the benefit to women and to their business model of monetizing that data. And yeah, these are exceptional companies, and we're so happy to have them here today. But I will tell you, we're seeing more and more companies that are taking on this type of complexity in their models. And that's why I think from an investment perspective, it's very, very encouraging. Okay, are Tersia and Emanuel with us? Can you show their images on the screen? Emanuel Gerson is the CFO of hearX Group, based in Pretoria, I think, in South Africa. And Tersia de Kock is the head of the hearX Foundation, also based in South Africa, but with responsibilities for the company's work in Kenya. Tersia and Emanuel, welcome. Are you with us?
Yes, James, thank you very much for hosting us. Much appreciated.
Great, lovely to see you. So I'm going to ask you just to go ahead, say quick hellos, and get started with your presentation.
Great,
Wonderful.
thank you. We are based, the hearX Group is based in South Africa. I play the role of the CFO, and Tersia has been leading our efforts in low to middle income countries with the distribution of hearing health, which we will give you slightly more detail on as we progress with our presentation. Tersia?
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. It's lovely to be with you. And we're excited to share a little bit about what we do at the hearX Group. As James has said, I'm Tersia de Kock. I'm by training an audiologist, but also the director of our hearX Foundation, working to bring the incredible work also to low and middle income countries. So just to make sure you are able to see my screen.
Yep, we're good.
Great.
Yeah, all good.
Okay, so just to give a little bit of background, currently globally we are sitting with 466 million people presenting with a permanent disabling hearing loss. And these are the latest stats from the WHO World Report on Hearing that's been released at the end of last year. And we also see that what's quite frightening is that this number will grow to about 2.5 billion by the year 2050. When we zoom in a little bit into the groups that's impacted most, we see that in our population of over 65-year-olds, 1 in every 3 persons are affected. And to just put this into perspective a little bit, if we look at the US market, for instance, every single day, an extra 10,000 people turn 65. So you can just imagine the numbers that we are talking about. Something that people aren't aware of is really the associated risks and comorbidities that we find with hearing loss. And if a hearing loss goes unaddressed, we see that the person is likely to suffer much more from social isolation and depression. And quite an important new factor that has come up and been proven by the research is that if a hearing loss goes undetected, you have 3 times increased risk for developing dementia, for instance. And we also see a massive increase in the risk for falls and hospitalization, and we know the impact of those on our senior population. We also see that the cost of this undetected hearing loss globally is about 980 billion rand per year for unaddressed hearing loss. The big problem is access. And access to care is extremely limited. And if we look at a developed market like the US, we see that we have 1 audiologist to every 25,000 people, which is still way too little. But if we zoom into Africa, for instance, we only have 1 audiologist to every 1 million people that needs to be served. And this is really the heart of hearX. So the status quo needed to be challenged. And we believe that healthy hearing should be for everyone, everywhere. And we use smart digital technologies to develop innovative service delivery models and to bring greater accessibility and affordability in the realm of hearing healthcare that's so often left out of primary healthcare, yet so needed. And at this point, I'm just going to hand over to Emanuel to tell you a little bit more about hearX.
Thank you, Tersia. So as James mentioned earlier, and to echo what it is that he raised, access and affordability are 2 key factors in the provision of hearing healthcare. As Tersia has alluded to, with only 1 for every 1 million people in Africa, it becomes very difficult for people with hearing loss or potential mild to moderate hearing issues to be diagnosed. So hearX was developed and born out of one of the Ivy League universities within South Africa, who have developed a extremely low-cost solution which delivers a high impact in the screening of hearing health. And this is not only specifically to those that are elderly, but rather also to learners that are entering the school environment, and also throughout the age growth, ensuring that people do have a baseline and the ability to detect the hearing, potential hearing loss as they progress in age. The technologies were developed using low-cost, off-the-shelf devices and hardware, which currently is the primary blocker to making hearing health available. Currently, the traditional model requires a booth and audiometry to be conducted by a trained audiologist, whereby through our technology, software, and algorithms, we are utilizing standard devices that are available globally, specifically even in low to middle income countries, calibrated with specific algorithms and software to enable boothless audiometry within community environments, and conducted by lay health workers with no specific years of training, but rather a 2 to 3 day course on how our technologies work. This enables us to screen for hearing health, as well as ear pathology, the likes of infections and other pathologies that may present within the ear. Not only did we identify the fact that hearing screening is a requirement, but further, once screened and diagnosed, there is a need for a device to be made available to these patients. hearX has partnered with certain manufacturers globally to develop a medical grade hearing aid, which is registered and considered and meets the FDA requirements, as well as many others, including CE, to provide these devices at a cost-effective price within these environments. Tersia, can we have the next slide? To date, over 1.4 million tests have been conducted globally using hearX technology, and this has also allowed for us to aggregate this data and build out a data platform with AI behind it, allowing us to start predicting and understanding where prevalence of hearing loss may take place. Next slide, Tersia. What has been identified through our journey, specifically looking at first world countries, one of them being the US, is that hearing aid services are extremely expensive, with up to $5,000 for a pair of hearing aids being incurred. So too, hearing technologies are usually 95% fitted through audiologists. Regulation in the United States has been recently released with regards to over-the-counter hearing. This has been 5 years in the making and was just released recently in August, evidencing that the world has realized, specifically even in first world countries, that affordable hearing is a critical requirement for the population. hearX has partnered with many large corporations, including the World Health Organization, and also Bose, one of the largest hearing providers and audiology providers globally, to make available our services within the USA, specifically leveraging off of the OTC regulations. To date, hearX has developed traction and investability in a key market, first world market being the USA, and has managed to glean large institutional and commercial investors and funders. In doing so, we have built anchor markets that provide sustainable businesses with month-on-month revenue growth. And with this, we are now able to leverage on this base and expand into LMIC and emerging markets, providing them with the hearing healthcare and devices that they so need. Following on the theme of Kenya, with the national language being Swahili and Baraka, as James mentioned, being blessing in Swahili. And so too also with Lancet having commented that their journey began in Kenya. I'm now going to hand back over to Tersia, who will walk you through our journey within Kenya and the provision of healthy hearing that we have undertaken.
Thank you, Emanuel. So yes, what we wanted to share just a couple of slides on today is to showcase what we've done in the US and had great success with. hearX being a social enterprise, we immediately started thinking, how can we adapt this model and develop a sustainable business model also for low and middle income countries? So as you could have seen in those stats, in the US, for instance, 1 in every 5 persons that need a hearing aid has got access to one. If we look at Africa and zooming into Kenya, only less than 3% of those that require a hearing aid has got access to one. And that's what led us to this program to also look into the low and middle income countries. And we secured support through the Assistive Technology Impact Fund about 18 months ago, and started with these 2 big goals in mind. Firstly, we wanted to develop and demonstrate a sustainable end-to-end hearing care model for LMICs. And then secondly, right from the beginning, we wanted to include an innovative financing model and opportunities for micro-entrepreneurship to further enhance the cost effectiveness, but also the sustainability of this model at scale. Just to give you a quick overview of what we are doing, there's this entire part of end-to-end hearing care. And through our hearX technologies, we firstly set out to detect the hearing problem and then to diagnose it. And here our technology, as Emanuel mentioned, is supplemented with AI, but also the algorithms are housed within the apps. So the person facilitating the testing doesn't have to have that expert knowledge. Then a third step that we built in, especially for the LMIC market, was that we realized that people don't even know what the assistive technology can do for them. And there's also a lot of fears and cultural beliefs out there that we had to build into this model. And as a third step, we thus also give the end user an opportunity to actually experience the technology and what it can do for them before taking it further. And then fourthly, we are able to treat the hearing loss using the same hearing aids, high quality, yet affordable hearing aids that we use in the US that can immediately be fitted to that person's unique hearing profile through Bluetooth technology. And then as a fifth step, we also realize in these markets that you often find that hearing aids, for instance, are dumped and then just found in a drawer a couple of weeks later. And we realize that building in innovative customer support in this context is super important. Importantly on this slide as well, to note is that step 1 to 5 can happen in the community and can be facilitated through a non-professional, at the same time reaching international standards of hearing aid satisfaction levels. And so we set out to develop this as a business model in Kenya. And we always start off by model validation, and we implemented this entire model in South Africa, in low-income communities, to be able to evaluate them. And it's here where we have found that the users, after 6 weeks and again after 6 months, are able to achieve hearing aid satisfaction levels that is on par with international hearing aid satisfaction scores. In Kenya, we set out to investigate 3 different distribution and financing models. We believe that you have to develop the model with the consumer's input in mind, especially in low and middle income countries. So we spoke to 450 users in the field and got their input to really understand the customer profile and journey, and started with some financial modeling. In the end, we decided as a pilot, a first leg, to partner with Ilara Health. They are an innovative also health company that through digital technologies enable clinics in low-income communities to provide high-quality care. And as they have an existing network and footprint and resources, it was an ideal platform to integrate with them and provide the services at their clinics. So just to pull everything together, James asked just to share a couple of key factors that we found through this work that really aid in the sustainability and scale and affordability of such a model in the low and middle income sector. And a few things that I can just pull out is firstly that we believe in quality innovation, and that we really need high quality products with good customer outcomes, that's evidence-based, that in order to have success. And at the same time, leveraging different models to make that affordable.
Tersia, it's James just jumping in. I'm a little worried about time and would love you to just go through that as quickly as you could. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Perfect. 100%. This is the final slide.
Okay.
So secondly, just using enabling technologies. As you saw, all 5 steps in the model is made possible through digital innovations. Thirdly, to build in something to address fears and build trust in your business model, and also innovative customer care, as I touched on previously. And then lastly, just consumer financing models to aid in affordability. Here, we also used existing models like the M-Pesa system in Kenya, and doing small down payments over a couple of months to make it more affordable for the customer. And lastly, the big need in these middle and low and middle income countries for micro entrepreneurship. We find that people are very business minded, very entrepreneurial, and that the success of the model is enhanced through building that into the model to also create opportunities where that clinic owner, for instance, can facilitate the service and products by also aiding his income and running that as a small entrepreneurial business within his area. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, both Tersia and Emanuel. Thanks so much for being on and taking the time. We'll try to move along quickly. Those of you who are able to stay, I really want to encourage you, because we move into the panel discussion. We have 2 really interesting investors joining the rest of the team, as well as our UN Development Program representative. So you'll have some very different perspectives on the entire topic of investment. So Claire Stokes is from Population Services International. She's going to talk about a really dynamic program. I can tell you that the team at Baraka, as we've learned more and more about what PSI has been doing, has become extremely excited, and we think it's a model for a number of NGOs in different sectors of health to think about commercialization opportunities. And so go ahead, Claire, and you'll keep it to the 7.
Yes, I'll do my best. Yeah, good morning. So I'm actually happy to present today the journey that PSI has embarked on, as it tries to move from an NGO model that's donor-focused to a model that's really consumer-focused and consumer-financed to a large extent. So for those of you who don't know what PSI is, PSI is a global, not-for-profit organization that uses private sector techniques to the service of public health goals. It's quite broad, and at scale, it works in more than 50 countries and 5 key health areas. And the model that seduced me when about 20 years ago, I was working in marketing and management consulting, but I was mostly selling shampoos with Unilever. And I decided to join PSI because they were doing social marketing for condoms, and it was much more fun. So the social marketing programs traditionally had been funded by donors, bilateral organizations and multilateral organizations. And they were built on really importing products, branding those products, distributing them, and then doing the behavior change and quality of care that needed to go with it. Now, as we discussed a bit earlier, you know that ODA has been stagnant, and that donors have shifted their attention to health systems. So they really have moved away from funding products. And when this shift happened, several of the PSI countries decided to explore a model to keep those products in markets. And so basically, they started to look at how can we actually sell those products at a price that allows us to cover our costs. So this model was explored by different countries and in multiple markets. And you see the list of those countries here. And in 2018, this led to the creation of a social business unit that really focuses on sales and revenues while still trying to do health impact and keeping the NGO work on health system strengthening. So I just want to talk briefly about 2 countries where this shift happened. Cambodia is one of these countries. I was the country director in Cambodia from 2014 to 2018. And when we were there, we literally pioneered this model of selling products to cover our costs. Within the context of an NGO. So it's a non-profit organization. It's registered as a non-profit entity. But we started to develop this more commercial side of the model by selling the sexual and reproductive health products, by segmenting those markets, by targeting the consumers that we were discussing earlier, this middle income consumer that makes between $5 and $30. And we also started to explore other avenues for revenue generation. So looking at e-commerce, looking at engaging on social media, and working with providers. And so if I show you here the financial picture for Cambodia, you see that the volumes have been a bit steady and on the rising trend. The net sales have grown very steadily, and the operating income is positive. Now, obviously, this operating income we use to fund the NGO work. It's not profit for shareholders because we don't have that. Southern Africa is a bit different. So in Southern Africa, there was already an NGO, but we started a separate entity, a social for-profit entity in 2012. This started with funds from the Dutch government and was focusing on condoms and had a regional footprint. So it's South Africa plus 6 export markets. After a few years, the condom growth was established and the condom portfolio was doing well. And so the organization decided to expand into sexual and reproductive health on the pharma side. For that expansion, they also got support from SIDA, the Swedish International Development Agency. And they had to switch really from an FMCG model, a fast-moving consumer goods model, to a pharma model, and integrate that model into their work, meaning getting a pharmaceutical license, registering products. So quite a challenging type of work with COVID in the middle. And so the trajectory there is is not as good as Cambodia financially, but it's getting there. So you see that the net sales were slowed down in the COVID years, but now the sales are really picking up in South Africa. The operating income has been a loss mostly, but largely compensated by these donor subsidies that the company needed. And we expect that as of 2023, it will be breaking even. So those 2 markets are just example of what PSI does globally. And at the current time, this social business unit, which directly supports the SDG 3 and 5, operates in 20 markets around the world. And we expect this to grow. It's a broad footprint because we built those businesses on existing consumer bases from the NGO work that we took and really leveraged through all this work. So in 2021, it was 6 million consumers reached with a broad portfolio of almost 40 products. It's 137 million of sales in 45,000 pharmacies and clinics around the world. And we also recently launched a platform, a digital platform under an umbrella brand that we call VIA. And that's allowing us to really work into the digital the digital world and start, gathering data on digitally connected consumers. I think this model works because we leverage partnerships and strategic alliances across the supply chain. I think one of the strong example of the way we work is we work with manufacturers so that they do contract manufacturing for PSI, or we do distribution agreements with those manufacturers because we have the infrastructure and the footprint that they are seeking. We also work with distributors, whether it's traditional or e-commerce. And most recently, we've developed partnerships in social media, in telehealth, in artificial intelligence. We currently have a partnership with Meta and Facebook to promote sexual and reproductive health in several countries around the world, and that's been really successful. The other aspect of, I think, the success of this model is that it relies on very strong business planning processes, a strong management discipline. We look at business results every month. We report to our board of directors, and we have very standardized processes to help the countries plan for their 5-year business plans. And so globally, as of today, we're a business of about $40 million in revenue. The operating income is positive, has been positive for a couple of years, but we still have donor subsidy that help us with growth and innovation. So looking towards to the future, I think what we envision is that the portfolio will continue developing with the VIA offer. Hold on a second for the video. Can you hold on a second for the video? Thank you. So we expect that our offer and our portfolio will continue to grow, and we're really investing in this umbrella brand called VIA, because VIA is basically the brand we want to establish as a sexual and reproductive health partner for all women in LMICs. We know that we have the infrastructure, the staffing, and the experience, the consumer knowledge in particular to make this work. And of course, we're also always looking for diversified sources of funding. So it's a combination of using our own funds from this operating income that we generate in some countries, as well as working with grants and what I would call patient capital from investors who share the same values as we do. And so to wrap this up, I wanted to show you a little video that explains the VIA concept in images. Thank you. Okay, now you can go for the video.
So cool. That's just great. Well done. That's really great. I hadn't seen the video.
N'importe
It's
quelle
just
pièce.
wonderful. Probably don't need to watch that, I don't think. So we're going to bring our panelists in, and I'm sorry that everything is running a little bit longer here. So we have Saba Suhani from the United Nations Development Program, the International Center in Istanbul, and we've got Claire. You're going to come up and join us as well. And then online, we have Shannon Shabata Germanos. I hope that they're there. Shannon is actually in Geneva, but with an extremely busy day, so she asked to come in virtually. Shannon is an investor. Hi, Shannon, you're there, and Caitlin as well. Hi. Shannon, as I said, is in Geneva. She is the founder of Lacuna Advisors, an investment advisory service. She also is the chair of the Health Innovation Exchange Investor Advisory Council. We've been working with Shannon for a couple of years now. We had the pleasure of her participation in last year's program. Super smart about the health sector space. She's also a neuroscientist and a very accomplished businesswoman. So thank you, Shannon, again for being here. And then Caitlin Bristol is with Johnson & Johnson Impact Ventures, based in the UK, and responsible for sourcing, evaluating, and due diligence associated with Johnson & Johnson's investments in health innovations throughout emerging markets for underserved populations globally. As I said, Baraka worked closely with Johnson & Johnson. We've been quite intimate with their business, and I didn't get to meet Caitlin until very recently, and it's been delightful, also super knowledgeable about the sector. So thank you, Caitlin, for being here. Apologies for starting so long. So, I'd love to get some initial impressions, to these companies. I mean, I know all these companies, but as I watch them, I'm impressed. The complexity, the scope, and the potential. And I might turn this over, Shannon, because I know you'll have opinions. If you could comment about some of what you're seeing here in terms of themes for scalability and investability. What strikes you?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me, James and Baraka. So one of the things as a family office, my husband and I look at for our investments in the Global South, we love the dual market strategy companies, the ones that we talked about with some of the companies looking at developed markets as well as the Global South. And we focus on asset-light health plays because looking at the macro market as it exists today, especially supply chain issues, all these sorts of issues really do play into the scalability of a company, and we're concerned about that. So one of the companies that really struck me is hearX. I really love that storyline because they're thinking about all the elements within the ecosystem. One, they're looking at low-cost, off-the-shelf type technology that is accessible and affordable, but they're also looking at the health systems that they're deploying into. They're considering the workforce capacity shortage that already exists. A lot of companies don't do that. They're like, we're going to layer into healthcare systems, we're going to do this. And I'm like, well, who's going to deliver it? Because most people are burnt out, clinicians are burnt out, they're not getting paid enough. And getting that deployed into health systems in the Global South can be challenging. So the fact that they can have community-based leaders trained easily on this is something that really speaks to us and that we would be delighted to hear. We also love the fact that they're working in conjunction with groups like Elara, obviously, because we're invested in Elara, and leveraging the ecosystems that are already built within the communities to then get more penetration into the market. So yeah, really long and short of it right now, I really like seeing that. And I like the fact that it's asset light and doesn't require a lot of CapEx.
Great summary. Caitlin, your own impressions on any of the company you've seen. I mean, one thing that maybe to add, because you and I were clarifying this, Johnson & Johnson for their current impact fund is generally deploying at about $500,000 to $2 million ticket size. So, many of these companies are an area and a ticket size that Johnson & Johnson would consider. But what strikes you as interesting or different or inside or outside of your investment themes?
Sure, thank you. So first of all, I would say it was really exciting to see the breadth of what was presented earlier today. For folks like us on the phone and hopefully a lot of you in the room, this is a really exciting moment and time. So thank you again to all the presenters. From a J&J Impact Ventures perspective, we're focused on investing in companies and other innovative finance mechanisms that support frontline health workers, address health inequities, and bring game-changing or previously inaccessible services to people in need. And so you saw a lot of that across the spectrum this morning. I feel like we're in this defining moment, especially for digital health. Last year, we saw venture capitalists invest over $5 billion into this space. And so as a result, I think we've seen this notable rapid evolution in how healthcare is delivered, can be delivered, and what services are offered. So we saw a lot of that this morning. One I would say in particular that was exciting for us is Mammo Test, and seeing the pull through, not just to one service with the mammography, but all the way through that patient journey that they're staying connected and making sure it's not just one gap. I think we know there's a lot of holes in the system. And if we can find companies and organizations that are committed to targeting in and zeroing in where they know there's a specific expertise or technology that needs to be solved, but then making sure they're connected in all the way through so that the patient really is at the center there and being served in the most efficient, cost-effective way that's connected into that system. So we're hopefully excited to continue carving out a role for J&J in this rapidly growing space with that particular focus on investing in entrepreneurs who are addressing the needs of the communities who are underserved, not just coming in with the technology that works.
Great, thank you, Caitlin. Saba, I want to turn it over to you, and I want to just briefly describe what it is that you and the team at SDG Finance Hub have created, because they've got an amazing data set now that's open to the public that identifies investment opportunities across many, many countries. 140, some number like that? Big number of countries. Okay, all right. And what I'll say about that data, and I've had very close contact with the UNDP folks, is it's extremely comprehensive and broad, and not always, and you'd be the first to say this, I think, not always as deep as you want to go in each and every sector. When you look at opportunities like were presented today, what comes to mind about the connection between the multilateral network that you represent and the data that you represent, and then driving that to assist investors in finding these opportunities? How are you looking at that?
Absolutely. I mean, coming from UNDP, which is a SDG integration kind of agency of the UN rather than a single theme, our approach was the health is around buttressing national health systems, right? In that context, I think that what really struck me from today is if we use our maps and then we have these amazing companies, we really have to focus in the national ecosystem around things like what is the best way to enable B2G models we saw, for example, here. There's innovation sandbox for governments that is not about procurement, something in between where they can start, working, testing or getting some kind of contract. This is like one specific type of instruments that we're looking at to replicate in the global south. I think the second thing we've been doing is trying to mobilize also domestic capital in support of this, crowd in different sources in domestic capitals. I think that will be very, very much. And as I said, as an integrator and not just an agency focus, I mean, we are one of the largest global fund implementing agency and other things, but we don't only work on essential commodities, we also work on, for example, smart health facilities. So using the climate and health nexus, there's a whole set of new infrastructure plays in the health system that's coming to play. How to build intelligent sort of facilities that are also using renewable, but also, ensuring the kind of health access that we want. We during COVID, we built around 30 smart health facilities in diagnostic lab, warehousing, looking at this future with DHL and others. So these are the three things. The other thing I would just finally note is that our administrator talks about the SDG. If you don't look at it as an opportunity, think about it as a risk map of the world. And look at how the risk interplay. I mean, the zoonotics, and basically we saw what happens, right? So in that context, I think really we have a good number of people in the room, but I hope in the next year we see more people need to come, because if we don't have the kind of resilient health systems that we need, this is where a lot of investment needs to go. I mean, we saw what happened with COVID in terms of the societies and all those sort of things.
Well, you're preaching to the converted here, but I love it. SDG 3 as a risk map, and that's the question. Is it as an opportunity map or the risk map what's going to draw the attention that's needed?
Well, just on that point, I mean, we did a recent survey of business CEOs with Global Compact and others, and 70% of people see climate as sort of material to the risk. 65 see water. I mean, water I think is a public good that if private companies use it, they should be pay for it. But only 18% saw inequality. I don't remember what was for health, but my point is, I think the pitch to investors also has to, I know climate is the global investment thesis that a lot of people resonate with, but we have to say, look at these other dimensions that comes into play. So that's why for us, our infrastructure smart facility play is one of the entries we go into, because I think that's when we start bringing people into the room for a different set of investors. Thank you.
So yeah, you brought up really interesting things. I want to put a placeholder right now on the concept of domestic capital, and I'd like to come back to that and have both Caitlin and Shannon in particular talk about your perspectives on domestic capital at the table. But then I think, and maybe we should go there because I lost my train of thought where I was going to go for the next one. Let's just do that. Let's talk a little bit about domestic capital and your perspectives when you're coming into an investment, about seeing local money at the table, and what that journey has been like, and how critical it is or is not to your investment decisions. Either Caitlin or Shannon, if you were ready to jump in on that, we'd love to hear from you. Okay, Caitlin.
Sure. So I can just comment. I mean, one thing we would look at both from the founder and the team level, as well as the ecosystem surrounding them, is that we really believe that there's strength in that proximate leadership, that entrepreneurs who are innovating and have the lived experience with the community and the problems that they're trying to solve. And so I think there's a lot of power in that from the domestic capital conversation as well. Now, it's not always an exclusive or a must-have, because I think there's different dynamics at the table, but that certainly speaks highly of an ecosystem where you've seen a local investor or local player, whether that be government capital or other VCs or investment ecosystem, interested in this company, seeing that amongst everything else that's going on, this has real potential. They understand the local market, and then they're able to crowd in as well. Shannon, a few comments on that too.
Caitlin, so well aligned. I agree 100%. And from our perspective, we always like to see on the cap table individuals that are locally present. We've looked at great companies like Vilgro, who are investing on the ground in places like Kenya as a venture capital firm. And they obviously know the market, they know the politics and policies locally as well, and can help the entrepreneurs to navigate appropriately where we cannot. That is something that we support and co-create with the innovators on the ground, but they need to drive it because they understand the pain points in the country and in their region much better than we ever could. We see ourselves as a supportive force to really drive that local engagement.
I remember my next question. It was something you just said, this whole idea of the SDG 3 risk map versus the opportunity map. If you in the audience haven't already picked it up, I'm trying to sell you on global health investment. I think we should be doing it big time. And so I'm always looking for what the right pitch is. And I think, you bring up the kind of the fear versus the reward. And Claire, you just very calmly stated what we all know to be true. ODA has plateaued. We're not seeing an increase in funding from those sources. And so this is a mandate if we're going to solve these problems. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the motivation for investors, your best call on what is going to spark investors to understand the opportunity or to respond to the fear. Go ahead, Saba.
I mean, we also have to differentiate between what we call missing marketing opportunity and missing markets, right? There's a study that looked at 500 type of business models like this, and the average, it took 3 years to scale, let's say, missing marketing, mobile money, etc. These are really missing markets. So I think these other elements have to be there. I mean, the government's role has to be clear in terms of what is the private if you do a private investment in hospitals. I mean, just an example of the kind of questions on the value-added UNDP. We brought the former central bank governor of Nigeria, and she's now the special advisor to the president, here in a meeting. And the meeting with the investor was very targeted. I mean, they're like, how do you will ensure the talent capacity is met when people are leaving your country? Yeah. How about my FX? Right? So these are across, how would I say, sectors. But also, look, if you really want to make sustainable finance and impact part of your remit, you have to pay special attention. Yeah. So I think that is the element. The two other things I would note is the structure of businesses in these developing countries is a bit. I come from West Africa, Middle Eastern. People have holding books that don't make sense. You have like hospital, and then you got real estate, and you got something else. But I also believe these family-owned companies locally have also access to their own networks of financing. And if we can get the second or third generation, because I notice some people have founders' money to start these things, so they're also embedded, there's a de-risking approach. So another entry strategy for investors is to look at those folks and see, okay, who's maybe the third generation that has the sort of managerial requisite thing, I don't know, from the US or whatever, and who goes back into their country and can be, a player to enable these type of businesses that we need. Thank you.
It's super interesting. Again, Claire, I'd like to hear you, because there's something you touch on there about local partnerships in implementation and operations, but also strategically how you position yourself. And PSI, it's kind of part of your DNA to go in and establish partnerships. How does that look in the context of these burgeoning commercial operations? Do you have who you need as your partner?
So in terms of partners for access to products or services, or even digital health, now we are finding more and more local partners, and we're trying. There are priority partners if they are local. They already have an infrastructure in country, and they're open to working with us, because again, what we bring is really this focus on the consumer-powered healthcare, and they usually resonate very well with that. In terms of investors, it's a bit more complicated, because especially sexual and reproductive health is not necessarily a natural place for local investors to invest in. And so I think we found that we can find maybe small partnerships in the shape of donations or technical support maybe. But when it comes to big ticket items, we typically have to really look regionally or globally.
Okay. They're giving me a timeout sign here, like in a really aggressive, nice way. And I want to just take a minute for each of you to come in with any kind of concluding remarks or overarching messages that you'd like the audience to hear about what we've presented today. And Shannon, I'll start with you, and then we'll come on around the room the way we see it.
Okay. I think that right now we're facing a global crisis of workforce capacity. That's a place that we focus on a lot. And we've seen Melinda Gates and Clinton Global Initiative just put money forward for that as well. This is not a problem somewhere. It's everywhere in our backyards as well. And we need to start thinking about how do we leverage innovations in digital technology to layer it into traditional evidence-based training models on the ground, so that we can then scale quickly to hit this need that has become a crisis after COVID-19. So this is where I think for investors, we need to step up and step in. But for those that are not used to it, this is why we need institutions like Baraka, like others, like PSI, to help bridge over, to make investors more comfortable with the FX issues, with the on-ground issues, and really looking at how these markets are different than what they're used to. People might use technologies in a totally different way than would be expected, and that's okay. These are new markets, and we need to let the market drive it. But there's huge opportunity. So it's very exciting. Thanks.
Great. Perfect. Thanks, Shannon. Caitlin, to you.
Sure. I think so. Hopefully, maybe the perspective I can bring as a corporate investor, for us, most importantly, we're looking at impact investments as a kind of a way, or a better way even, to scale our impact at the philanthropy and foundation level. So a cry and a plea out there to all folks, especially in the corporate sector, working with their foundation to consider and looking at impact investment and bringing capital in a different way alongside traditional grant-making strategies. We're a relatively new organization internally, only launched in late 2019 as that investment vehicle or fund within the foundation. And since then, we've invested in more than a dozen health impact entrepreneurs, supported close to 50 founders through earlier stage accelerators and fellowship programs. And those investments have enabled our portfolio companies to support over 13,000 healthcare providers and reach an additional 1.8 million lives and counting. So we're seeing the scale of market-based solutions alongside our traditional grant making. And I would just love and encourage anyone who's thinking about this from that foundation or corporate sector to get in touch. We'd be happy to chat further.
Thank you, Caitlin. Claire, any closing comments?
No, I think it's great to see all the innovations that are in development and rising to the surface. I think for me, what really matters is that investments go to places where, again, there is space for the consumer and an offering that really serves consumer needs, and those might be slightly different by country. And I think that consumer knowledge and focus remains really essential.
Saba.
Being an organization at the coalface of communities, governments, and other stakeholders, I think it's quite important that governments, at least, and there's a national consensus in terms of the role of private investment, private engagement in the health sector in these countries that work with. I think we need to have a global strategy of entry with business model that can be replicated in different world, but we know also culture eats strategy for lunch. So we need to ensure within certain countries where we move in, that clarity provided around the kind of business models from PSI to others. And then that consensus enables us to, get the right kinds of financial incentives, regulatory from government, in terms, as we said, because we're dealing with a missing market, not a missing marketing opportunity.
Yeah, great, well said. Thank you, everybody. I'm sorry for the time compression. I do want to throw out a quick acknowledgement to our partners here in Geneva, Accelerate 2030. What an amazing organization. Santo, you're in the room. It looks like Luca left, but thank you to all of you for helping us through. We've been scattered around the world and couldn't get ourselves organized without your help. So thanks so much. As always, it's great to be partners with you. And thanks, everybody, for coming. We look forward to further conversation. Be well.
Thank you so much.